All right, here's an exercise for you. I want you to write a function that takes two numbers and returns the maximum of the two. Call that function, give it different arguments, and make sure it's working properly. So pause the video, do this exercise, and when you're done, come back, continue watching. I'm going to start by defining a function, call it max. Here we need two parameters. We can call them number 1 and number 2, or we can use shorter names like a and b. Now earlier I told you not to use mysterious variable names like a and b. But in this particular case, it doesn't really matter because a and b are kind of self-explanatory. So we're not dealing with a complex logic. We don't have to guess what a and b are, as you will see in a second. So in this function, we want to have some logic. We want to compare the value of a with b. So we're going to use an if statement. So if a is greater than b, we want to return a. Else, we want to return b. That's the simplest implementation. It's not the best way. We're going to optimize this step by step. But before going any further, let's make sure that this function actually works. So I'm going to declare a variable called number and set it to max of 1 and 2. Now let's display number on the console. Save the changes. So max is 2. So if the second argument is greater, our function works. What if the first argument is greater? So let's change 1 to 3. Save. Now we see 3. Perfect. What if both arguments are equal? Once again, save the changes. We still see 3. Perfect. Now before going any further, did you notice how I called this function with different arguments? I called it with different test cases. First, I assumed if the second argument is greater, then I assumed if the first argument is greater, and finally I assumed that both arguments are equal. So when writing code, when writing functions, you should test your functions with different possible values, okay? Now, let's get back to this max function and clean up this code. The first thing I want to improve here is to remove this else keyword. Why? Because if a is greater than b, we're going to return a, so we'll jump out of this function. So none of the code after line 6 will be executed. In fact, we will never get to this point. So we don't really need the else keyword, okay? So if a is greater than b, we'll return a, otherwise we'll return b. So this is a cleaner implementation. But hey, we can make this even cleaner. So earlier you learned about the conditional operator. Remember this? So we had a condition in parentheses, question mark. If this condition evaluates to true, we use one value, otherwise we use the other value, right? We can rewrite these two lines using our conditional operator. So what is the condition here? If a is greater than b. If this condition is true, we want to return a, otherwise we want to return b. All we need here is a return statement and terminate this with a semicolon. So this line is exactly equivalent to these two lines. Now, save the changes. Both arguments are equal. We get 3. So far, so good. Let's try another test case. I'm going to make the first argument larger. Let's say 5. We get 5. Now let's make the second argument larger, 10. Beautiful. So our function is working.